Hi, my name's Emma and I've been a clinical psychologist for more than 20 years. I decided I wanted to be a clinical psychologist when I was about 16. I'd seen a film called The Silence of the Lambs, which is about a serial killer, and I decided I wanted to be the FBI agent Clarice Starling who was sent to talk to him. It quickly dawned on me they wouldn't take me in the FBI, not being American. And so I tried to come up with the next best thing, and in this country that's secure units like Broadmoor. At that time, Broadmoor only took clinical psychologists, and so I decided that's what I wanted to be. When I told my careers advisor, she strongly suggested I give that idea up, as only 1 to 2% of psychology graduates go on to become clinical psychologists. Well, that sounded like a challenge to me, so I decided to go ahead and do that. The route into clinical psychology is quite a long and arduous one. It doesn't matter what A levels you take, but you then do an undergraduate degree in psychology. Whilst I say it doesn't matter, I was always really grateful that I did maths with stats at A level, as it made the stats needed for the degree a lot easier for me, and people who hadn't done that really had to work a lot harder at it. Once you've got your first degree, you need to go on to get a place on the Doctorate of Clinical Psychology training. These are really difficult placements to get. They expect a first class or at very least a 2-1 in your first degree, and then they expect a wide variety of experience that you're expected to actually go out and work before you can get that doctorate. It can help to have a master's degree, but it's not essential. I don't have one. So for me, my work experience was for 2 years between my 2 degrees. The first job I did was with people with acquired brain injury. So these people needed help with their activities of daily living and were staying in a private psychiatric hospital in Kent. My job was to help them with those activities under the guidance of a clinical psychologist. The second job I got to gain experience was working at the National Hospital for Neurology and Neurosurgery under a very famous professor called Elizabeth Warrington. This was really my big break. A lot of people went for that position, and somehow I managed to talk my way into it. I was essentially Professor Warrington's personal assistant for a year, which meant getting involved in her research, running a small amount of my own research, whilst being paid through a drug trial. So I was working with people with early stages of dementia and measuring their progress in order to see whether the drugs they were taking was helping to slow down their dementia. After these 2 years' experience, I decided to have a go at applying for the doctoral programme. I have to say I wasn't expecting to get on, as many people spend 3, 4, 5 years gathering experience. So this was my trial run, and maybe that made me a bit more laid back about it all, because luckily I ended up being offered 2 places, one at the Royal Holloway course and one on the UCL course. I chose Royal Holloway because as a smaller course out of London, it suited me better. The 3-year clinical psychology doctorate is well known for being one of the most difficult postgraduate degrees. It's the same level of qualification as a PhD, but because it's a taught course, we call it a doctorate. The good thing about it is that actually you get a salary, which is not very common for a doctoral course. But as you work 3 days for the NHS as a clinical psychologist in training, then that means you get a salary. You spend the other 2 days in university and doing your own research for your thesis. Personally, my thesis was in attachment styles of stalkers. So I worked in a lot of secure units, including Broadmoor and Rampton, to do that research. During the doctorate, you take 6 different placements. There are some core placements in adults, children and older adults, and usually also in learning disabilities. And then you choose 2 specialist placements, both of which for me were in forensic. I finally qualified in 2003, which I think put me at 27. So really in uni for a long time if you want to go down this path. But as I say, you are being paid for that work. So as a newly qualified psychologist, you can enter the NHS at a band 7, which is the entry grade for psychologists. As a newly qualified psychologist, the first job that I took was working with adults. I was working up in York at the time, and I had a split post. So half of it was working with psychology referrals. These were generally people like you and me, people who were just managing, they were okay in their lives, they might have a phobia or some anxiety or some depression, and they were coming along for treatment for that. The other part of my job was within an adult mental health team. Now, these people are normally a little bit more unwell, so they might be struggling with bipolar disorder, a personality disorder, or a psychosis. Sometimes these people were in and out of hospital, so my job would be to visit them as inpatients if they were, and then to follow up with them in the community later. My second job in the NHS was quite different. It was working for an IAPT team, which is an Increasing Access to Psychological Therapies team. I was a manager and supervisor in this team, so I had up to 35 young psychological wellbeing practitioners working for me, and my job was to supervise all their clinical cases as well as doing my own clinical work. These cases generally tended to be on the milder end, but as we took self-referrals, really anything could come through the door. So it would be my job to take the cases that perhaps needed a little bit more experienced treatment. Following having my second child, I decided to leave the NHS and set up my own private practice. I've been doing this for nearly 7 years now, and I absolutely love it. This really was the lifestyle that I trained for. So this is my cabin, which is in my garden, and this is my chair that I sit in to do therapy, and people sit on a couch just opposite me here. I can work around my family now, so I make appointments with my clients around the children and their schoolwork and what suits us as a family. At the moment, I'm working virtually using Zoom or FaceTime, and that's pretty good. But normally people come to see me here in the cabin, and I might see them weekly for a while or fortnightly later once they're starting to feel better. For me, the best bit about being a clinical psychologist is that people come and they tell me things they've never told anybody before. They honour me by trusting me with their secrets, with things that they find really difficult to talk about. And that to me is a very special thing and a real privilege. So I think that's everything about being a clinical psychologist. I hope that's answered some questions or that you found it interesting. And if anybody has any questions, then I look forward to helping you with them. Thanks very much. Bye.